I will repeat what I said. Before the tribunal, before the Chief Prosecutor of the United States proceeds to present the evidence on behalf, on count one, the tribunal wishes me to announce the decision on the application made on behalf of the defendant Julius Streicher by his counsel that his condition should be examined. It has been examined by three medical experts on behalf of the tribunal, and their report has been submitted to and considered by the tribunal, and it is as follows. 1. The defendant Julius Streicher is sane. 2. The defendant Julius Streicher is fit to appear before the tribunal and to present his defense. 3. It being the unanimous conclusion of the examiners that Julius Streicher is sane, he is for that reason capable of understanding the nature and quality of his acts during the period of time covered by the indictment. The tribunal accepts the report of the medical experts, and the trial against Julius Streicher will therefore proceed. The other matter which I have to refer to is a motion on behalf of counsel for Bormann, whom the tribunal have decided to try in his absence in pursuance of Article 12 of the Charter. Counsel for Bormann have made a motion that the trial against him should be postponed. But in view of the fact that the provisions of the Charter and the Tribunal's rules of procedure have been strictly carried out in the notices which have been given, and the fact that counsel for Bormann will have ample time before they are called upon to present the defense on his behalf, the motion is denied. I will now call upon counsel for the United States to present the evidence on count one.
May it please the tribunal, as the first order of business concerning the evidence, it shall be my purpose to outline the method of capturing, assembling, processing, and authenticating documents to be presented in evidence by the United States. I shall also describe and illustrate the plan of presenting documents and briefs relating to the United States case in chief. As the United States Army advanced into German territory, there were attached to each army and subordinate organization specialized military personnel whose duties were to capture and preserve enemy information in the form of documents, records, reports, and other files. The Germans kept accurate and voluminous records. They were found in Army headquarters, government buildings, and elsewhere. During the latter stages of the war particularly, such documents were found in salt mines, buried in the ground, behind false walls, and many other places believed secure by the Germans. For example, the personal correspondence and diaries of the defendant Rosenberg, including his Nazi correspondence, were found behind a false wall in an old castle in eastern Bavaria. The records of the OKL, or Luftwaffe, of which the defendant Goering was commander-in-chief, those records equivalent to the records of the headquarters of the Air Staff of the United States Army Air Forces, were found in various places in the Bavarian Alps. Most of such Luftwaffe records were assembled and processed by the Army at Berchtesgaden. When the Army first captured documents and records, they immediately placed the materials under guard and later assembled them in temporary document centers. Many times the records were so voluminous that they were hauled by fleets of Army trucks to document centers. Finally, as the territory seized was made secure, Army zones were established, and each Army established a fixed document center to which were transported the assembled documents and records. Later, this material was indexed and cataloged, which was a slow process. Beginning last June, Mr. Justice Jackson requested me to direct the assembling of documentary evidence on the continent for the United States case. Field teams from our office were organized under the direction of Major William H. Coogan, who established United States liaison officers at the main Army document centers. Such officers were directed to screen and analyze the mass of captured documents and select those having evidentiary value for our case. Literally hundreds of tons of enemy documents and records were screened and examined, and those selected were forwarded to Nuremberg for processing. I now offer in evidence an affidavit of Major Coogan dated November 19, 1945, attached hereto, describing the method of procedure, capture, screening, and delivery of such documents to Nuremberg. At this time, if your honors please, and in order to present this matter to the tribunal, I believe it wise to read at least substantial portions of this affidavit. It's dated the 19th of November, 1945. I, Major William H. Coogan, 0455814, Quartermaster Corps, a commissioned officer of the United States of America, do hereby certify as follows. 1. The United States Chief of Counsel in July 1945 charged the field branch of the Documentation Division with the responsibility of collecting, evaluating, and assembling documentary evidence in the European theater for use in the presentation of the major Axis war criminals before the International Military Tribunal. I was appointed chief of the field branch on 20 July 1945. I am now the chief of the Documentation Division, Office of the United States Chief of Counsel. I have served in the United States Army for more than 4 years, and I'm a practicing attorney by profession. Based upon my experience as an attorney and as a United States Army officer, I am familiar with the operation of the United States Army in connection with seizing and processing captured enemy documents. In my capacity as chief of the Documentation Division, the Office of the United States Chief of Counsel, I am familiar with and have supervised the processing, filing, translating, and photostating of all documentary evidence for the United States Chief of Counsel. I skip to paragraph 4. The field branch of the Documentation Division was staffed by personnel thoroughly conversant with the German language. Their task was to search for and select captured enemy documents in the European theater, which disclosed information relating to the prosecution of the major Axis war criminals. Officers under my command were placed on duty at various document centers and also dispatched on individual missions to obtain original documents. When the documents were located, my representatives made a record of the circumstances under which they were found, and all information available concerning their authenticity was recorded. Such documents were further identified by field branch pre-trial serial numbers assigned by my representatives, who would then periodically dispatch the original documents by courier to the Office of the United States Chief of Counsel. Upon receipt of these documents, they were duly recorded and indexed. After this operation, they were delivered to the screening and analysis branch of the Documentation Division of the Office of the U.S. Chief of Counsel, which branch re-examined the documents in order to finally determine whether or not they should be retained as evidence for the prosecutors. This final screening was done by German-speaking analysts on the staff of the U.S. Chief of Counsel. When the document passed the screeners, it was then transmitted to the document room of the Office of U.S. Chief of Counsel with a covering sheet prepared by the screeners showing the title or nature of the document, the personalities involved, and its importance. In the document room, a trial identification number was given to each document and each group of documents in cases where it was desirable for the sake of clarity to file several documents together. United States documents were given trial identification numbers in one of 5 series designated by the letters PS, L, R, C, and EC, indicating the means of acquisition of the documents. Within each series, documents were listed numerically. After a document was so numbered, it was then sent to a German-speaking analyst who prepared a summary of the document with appropriate references, personalities involved, index headings, information as to the source of the document as indicated by the field branch, and the importance of the document to a particular phase of the case. Next, the original document was returned to the document room, then checked out to the photostating department, where photostatic copies were made. Upon return from photostating, it was placed in an envelope in one of the several fireproof safes in the rear of the document room. One of the photostatic copies of the document was sent to the translators, thereafter leaving the original itself in the safe. A commission officer has been and is responsible for the documents in the safe. At all times when he is not present, the safe is locked and a military guard is on duty outside the only door. If the officers preparing the certified translation or one of the officers working on the briefs found it necessary to examine the original document, this was done within the document room in the section set aside for that purpose. The only exception to this strict rule has been where it has been occasionally necessary to present the original document to defense counsel for examination. In this case, the document was entrusted to a responsible officer of the prosecution staff. All original documents now located in the safes in the document room are now located in the safes in the document room, where they will be secured until they are presented by the prosecution to the court during the progress of this trial. Some of the documents will be offered in evidence by the United States, were seized and processed by the British Army. Also, personnel from the Office of the U.S. Chief of Counsel and the British War Crimes Executive have acted jointly in locating, seizing, and processing such documents. Substantially the same system of acquiring documentary evidence was utilized by the British Army and the British War Crimes Executive, as above set forth with respect to the United States Army and the Office of the U.S. Chief of Counsel. Therefore, I certify, in my official capacity as hereinabove stated, to the best of my knowledge and belief, that the documents captured in the British zone of operations and occupation, which will be offered in evidence by the U.S. Chief of Counsel, have been authenticated, translated, and processed in substantially the same manner as hereinabove set forth with respect to the operations of the U.S. Chief of Counsel. Finally, I certify that all documentary evidence offered by the U.S. Chief of Counsel, including those documents from British Army sources, are in the same condition as captured by the United States and British armies, that they have been translated by competent and qualified translators, that all photostatic copies are true and correct copies of the originals, and that they have been correctly filed, numbered, and processed as above outlined, signed by Major William H. Coogan. After the documents selected by the screening process outline reached our office, they were again examined, rescreened, and translated by U.S. Army personnel as outlined by Major Coogan. Finally, more than 2,500 documents were selected and filed here in this courthouse at least several hundred will be offered in evidence. They have been photographed, translated into English, filed, indexed, and processed. The same general procedure was followed by the British War Crimes Executive with regard to documents captured by the British Army, and there has been complete integration and cooperation of activities with the British in that regard. In order to present our case and to assist the tribunal, we have prepared written briefs on each phase of our case which cite the documents by appropriate numbers. Legal propositions of the United States will also be presented in such briefs. The briefs and documents will cover each allegation of the indictment, which is the United States' responsibility. I hold in my hand one of the trial briefs entitled Reshaping of Education, Training of the Youth, which will be offered later on this day. Accompanying each brief is a document book containing true copies in English of all documents referred to in the brief. I hold in my hand the document book that will be submitted to this tribunal in support of the brief which I have just exhibited to your honors. Likewise, copies in German have been or will be furnished to defense counsel at the time such documents are offered in evidence. Upon conclusion of the presentation of each phase or section of our case by counsel, the entire book of documents will be offered in evidence, such as this book. At the same time, Lieutenant Barrett, who will sit right here all during the trial and who is on our staff, will hand to the clerk of this tribunal the original documents, the original document that may be offered in evidence in this form. It will have the seal of the tribunal, will be Exhibit USA 2836-PS, and in turn, Lieutenant Barrett will hand that original document to the tribunal. In the same manner, the document books will be passed by Lieutenant Barrett to the clerk of the court, and these trial briefs for the assistance of the tribunal will be made available to the court and to defense counsel. Likewise, copies of documents actually introduced in evidence will be made available to the press. Thus, may your honors please, it is hoped that by this procedure, the usual laborious and tedious method of introducing documentary evidence may be expedited. May I therefore respectfully inquire of the tribunal and of defense counsel if there is any objection to the procedure outlined. If not, the United States will proceed with the presentation of the documentary and trial briefs as outlined herein.
Will you wait one moment,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
The tribunal has no objection.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. May I, if your honors please, pardon.
Perhaps my voice did not come to the microphone there. Can it be heard now? The tribunal has no objection to the course that you propose.
Thank you, sir. May your honors please, may I now announce what will be presented immediately following by the United States.
I think perhaps that I ought to say to counsel for the defendants that their silence will be taken as their assent to the course proposed.
Your Honor.
Can you hear me now? Is my voice coming through the microphone now? Well, then will you translate to the defendant's counsel that in the absence of any objection by them to the course proposed by Colonel Story on behalf of the Chief Prosecutor for the United States, the tribunal will take it that they agree that that course is convenient. Thank you, gentlemen.
Your Honors, please, the next presentation will be the briefs and documents on the common plan or conspiracy up to 1939. We will open by presentation of charts of the Nazi Party and Reich government with exhibits and explanation by Mr. Albrecht. Then will be followed a presentation of the trial briefs and documents on the other phases of the common plan or conspiracy up to 1939. Mr. Albrecht.
May it please the tribunal. The prosecution will now allude briefly to certain facts which may well be considered to be within judicial purview, the consideration of which the prosecution has found useful in understanding and evaluating the evidence that will be presented in the course of the trial in support of the allegations of the indictment. In the opinion of the prosecution, some preliminary references must be made to the National Socialist German Labor Party, the NSDAP, which itself is not one of the defendant organizations in this proceeding before this tribunal, but which is represented among the defendant organizations by its most important formations, namely the leadership corps of the NSDAP, which you will hear referred to as das Korps der politischen Leiter der NSDAP, the SS, die Schutzstaffeln der NSDAP, and the SA, die Sturmabteilungen of the party. With the permission of the tribunal, The prosecution will offer at this point, as its first exhibit, a chart showing the structure and organization of the NSDAP substantially as it existed at the peak of its development in March 1945. This chart has been prepared by the prosecution on the basis of information contained in important and well-known official publications of the National Socialist Party, with which the defendants must be presumed to have been well acquainted. We refer particularly to the organization book of the party, das Organisationsbuch der NSDAP, and the National Socialist Yearbook, Nationalsozialistisches Jahrbuch, of both of which, be it noted, the late defendant Robert Lye was the chief editor or publisher. Both books appeared in the course of time in many editions and in hundreds of thousands of copies throughout the period when the NSDAP was in control of the German Reich and of the German people. The chart, furthermore, which we are offering, has been certified on its face as correct by a high official of the Nazi Party, namely Franz Xaver Schwarz, the treasurer, or Reichsschatzmeister of the NSDAP, and its official in charge of party administration. And his affidavit is being submitted with the chart. And I now wish to offer that chart in evidence. Able to have this chart duplicated, and with the permission of the tribunal is making it available to all concerned. Now, before I offer some remarks of explanation concerning the organization of the National Socialist German Labor Party, which we believe will be found useful in connection with the prosecution's case, I would just like to call the attention of the tribunal to the fact that the larger chart which now appears is a simplification of the duplicated chart with which your honors have been furnished. For if it had been reproduced in the same detail, I'm afraid many of the boxes would not have appeared intelligible from this point. I would like to call your attention, first of all, to an organization with which we will have to become very familiar. The Leadership Corps of the NSDAP, the Reichsleiter, which has been named as a defendant organization and which comprises the sum of the officials and leaders of the Nazi Party. And if your honors will be good enough to follow me down the center line of the chart, we come to the main horizontal line of division where the word Reichsleiter appears. That is the first category of the leadership corps. I should say the main category, perhaps, of the leadership corps. The Führer, of course, stands above it. And if we follow the vertical line of division to the lower part of the chart, we reach 5 additional boxes which may be referred to collectively as the Hoheitsträger, the bearers of the sovereignty of the party. And those are the Gauleiter, the Kreisleiter, the Ortsgruppenleiter, the Zellenleiter, and the Blockleiter. Now the Führer, at the top of our chart, is the supreme and the only leader in the Nazi hierarchy. His successor, designate, was first the defendant Goering. It was first the defendant Hess, and subsequently the defendant Goering. Now the Reichsleiter, of whom 16 are shown on this chart, comprise collectively the Reichsleitung, the party directorate. Through them, coordination of party and state machinery were achieved. A number of these Reichsleiter, each of whom at some time was in charge of at least one office within the party directorate, were also the heads of other party formations and affiliated and supervised organizations of the party, and also of agencies of the state, and they even held ministerial positions. The Reichsleitung may be said to represent the horizontal organization of the party according to functions within which all threads controlling the varied life of the German people met. Each office within the Reichsleitung of the NSDAP executed definite tasks assigned to it by the Führer or by the leader of the party chancellery, the Chef der Reichskanzlei, who on the chart before you appears directly under the Führer. In 1945, the chef of the Parteikanzlei, I should have said, if your honors please, was Martin Bormann, the defendant in this proceeding. And before him, and until his flight to England in 1941, the defendant Rudolf Hess. It was the duty of the Reichsleitung to make certain that the tasks assigned to it by the Führer were carried out with expedition and without interruption, in order that the will of the Führer quickly and rapidly was communicated to the lowest party echelon, the lowliest Zelle or block. The individual officers of the Reichsleitung had the mission to remain in constant and closest contact with the life of the people through the agency of the subdivisions of the component party organizations in the Gaue, within the Kreis or the Ort or the lower groups. These leaders had been taught that the right to organize human beings accrued through the appreciation of the fact that a people must be educated ideologically. Weltanschaulich, the Germans called it. That is to say, according to the philosophy of National Socialism. Now, among the Reichsleiter on trial in this cause may be included the following defendants. If your honors will follow me to this broad horizontal line, we start at the extreme left at the box marked with the defendant Frank's name. At one time, although not in March 1945, he was the head of the legal office of the party. He was the Reichsleiter of the Reichsrechtsamtes. In the third square appears the defendant Rosenberg, the delegate of the Führer for ideological training and education of the party. He was called der Beauftragte des Führers für die Überwachung der gesamten geistigen und weltanschaulichen Schulung der NSDAP. Next to him, to the right, is the defendant von Schirach, leader of youth education, Leiter für die Jugenderziehung. And next to him, the late defendant, Robert Ley, at one time head of the party organization, the Reichsorganisationsleiter of the DAP, and also the leader of the German Labor Front, the DAF, Leiter der Deutschen Arbeitsfront. And then if we cross the vertical line and proceed to the right, in passing I might allude to the box marked with the name of Schwarz. He was the party official and Reichsleiter who certified to the chart before this tribunal. As we proceed further to the right, next to the last box, we find the name of the defendant Frick, who was the leader of the Reichstag fraction, the Leiter, der Reichstags Fraktionsleiter. The next categories to be considered are the Hoheitsträger. At the bottom of the vertical line in the center of the chart. The National Socialists called them the bearers of the sovereignty. To them were assigned political sovereignty over specially designated subdivisions of the state, of which they were the appointed leaders. The Hoheitsträger may be said to represent the vertical organization of the party. These leaders, these Hoheitsträger, included all Gauleiter, of which there were 42 within the Reich in 1945. A Gauleiter was a political leader of the largest subdivision of the state. He was charged by the Führer with the political, cultural, and economic control over all forms and manifestations of the life of the people and the coordination of the same with National Socialist philosophy and ideology. A number of the defendants before the bar of this tribunal were former Gauleiters of the NSDAP. I mention in this connection the defendant Streicher, Gauleiter of Franconia, Frankenführer they called him, whose seat was in the city of Nuremberg. Von Schirach was a Gauleiter of Vienna, and the defendant Saukel was Gauleiter of Thuringia. The next lower category on the chart were the Kreisleiter, the political leaders of a largest subdivision within a Gau. Then follow the Ortsgruppenleiter, the political leaders of the largest subdivision within the Kreis. And a Kreis consisted perhaps of several towns or villages, or in the case of a larger city, anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 households. The next Hoheitsträger were the Zellenleiter, the political leaders of a group of from 4 to 8 city blocks, or of a corresponding grouping within country districts. And then follow the Blockleiter. The political leaders are from 40 to 60 households. Now each of these political leaders, of these Hoheitsträger, or bearers of sovereignty, was directly responsible to the next highest leader in the Nazi hierarchy. The Gauleiter was directly responsible to the Führer himself. The Kreisleiter was directly responsible to the Gauleiter. The Ortsgruppenleiter to the Kreisleiter, and so on. The Führer himself reserved to himself, in accordance with the philosophy that runs through the party, the right to name all Führers. It was he personally that named the Reichsleiter, all members of the party directorate. It was he that appointed all Gauleiter and Kreisleiter and all political leaders down to the grade of Gauamtsleiter, which was a lower classification of political leaders within the party organization of the Gau. These Hoheitsträger, together with the Reichsleitung, constituted the all powerful group of leaders by means of which the Nazi Party reached right down into the lives of the people, consolidated its control of them, and compelled them to conform to the National Socialist pattern. For this purpose, broad powers were given to them, including the right to call upon all party formations to effectuate their plans. They could requisition the services of the SA and of the SS, as well as of the HJ and of the NSKK. And if I might direct your attention for the moment to the party organizations that appear at the extreme left of the chart, I would just like to say that structurally these organizations were organized regionally to accord with the offices and regions controlled by the Hoheitsträger. If I might be more explicit, let us take the SA. The subsidiary formations of the SA came down and corresponded in its lower organizations to the Gau, so that we have a Gauleitung in the SA, and further down to the Kreis, so that we have a Kreisleitung in the SA, and so that the Gauleiter and the Kreisleiter, to cite two examples, charged with a particular duty by the Führer, could call on these organizations for assistance in carrying out their tasks. The sinister implication of the use of this power will become more apparent as the prosecution's case develops, and as the wealth of evidentiary materials is introduced into evidence to prove the criminality of the defendant organizations. The component party organizations called Gliederungen within the party are shown at the extreme left of the chart, and are the organizations to which I directed the attention of your honors a moment ago. These organizations actually constitute the party itself, and substantially the entire party membership is contained within these organizations. The four principal organizations are sometimes referred to as paramilitary organizations. They were uniformed organizations, and they were armed. These organizations were the notorious SA and SS, who are named as parties defendant in this cause, the HJ, the Hitler Youth, and the NSKK, the motor corps of the party, the Kraftfahrkorps. Then there were also the National Socialist Women's Organization, the National Socialist German Students Bund, Deutscher Studentenbund, and the National Socialist University Teachers Organization, der Nationalsozialistische Dozentenbund. But there are additional organizations that were officially designated within the party as affiliated organizations, not Gliederungen or controlled organizations, but affiliated organizations, angeschlossene Verbände der NSDAP. Among those organizations, we have the